All probably have a personal connection when it comes to beaches, whether it's a place to hang out with friends and family, to participate in fun activities, or a place of serenity. Ever since I was a kid, my parents said that whenever we went to the beach, it was impossible to get me out of the water. I would spend hours upon hours swimming, surfing, and kayaking in the waves. Over the years, not much has changed, and I still consider the beach to be one of my favorite places to be. My favorite memories around the water were the summers and long weekends I spent on the Chesapeake Bay with my friends and family.
Family spends Labor Day weekend at the beach to celebrate my older brother's birthday. I've been doing this every year since I was born, and I have so many amazing memories relaxing in the sun and playing in the sand with my brothers and cousins. Beaches in Texas might not have the clearest waters or the most beautiful sand, but I have such a love for these beaches that I've grown up going to. It's difficult to think of them gone because of erosion and flooding due to climate change.
Personally, I always go to Clear Lake with my family every summer and enjoy a fun boat ride, paddleboarding, or simply lakeside dinners. Recently, the water levels have been changing drastically, where we haven't been able to put our boat in due to the lack of water one summer, and then the next, the water levels are too high and flooding the lake house. This effect has just not been occurring in Clear Lake, though. It has happened in many coastal cities around the United States and across the world.
Some of the major cities that would be affected include Miami, Bangkok, Amsterdam, Barca, Georgetown, Ho Chi Minh City, Kolkata, New Orleans, Venice, Savannah, Male, Dandong, and Port Said. By 2030, these cities could go underwater due to a detrimental effect of climate change, rising sea levels which will cause entire populations of humans and wildlife forced to migrate or end up dead.
This is a global issue, so it's incredibly important that we put all of our efforts into slowing down climate change to stop the oceans from rising. But we also need to pay attention to the cities affected to protect their communities, nature, and culture, as these are main factors of life itself.
One of these coastal cities we wanted to focus on was Miami, Florida. Miami is a very busy city, being home to almost 550,000 people. It is also home to a diverse and unique blend of history and culture. Miami is home to people from all over the world, with a majority coming from Cuba, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti. It is well known for its coastline, boating, and major boardwalk. Miami has hundreds of diverse and important neighborhoods, including Little Havana, Coral Gables, and downtown Miami.
However, the area of South Florida that Miami is in is extremely susceptible to erosion, and it is under threat of rising sea level. The famous beaches, coastal towns, and beachfront property are being destroyed, and their fresh drinking water is being polluted from the salty ocean water.
Currently, Miami is constructing a seawall in order to prevent ocean waves from capturing the sand on beaches by providing a solid barrier. While these walls help keep up homes, they damage life below water. Also, according to a local news source, WLRN, it could cost $75 billion to raise and repair every existing wall in Florida by 2040. This emphasizes how weak the seawalls are and how costly this reconstruction is. This also tells us that the degrading materials break off into the water, causing an increase in water pollution. The walls are typically made of concrete, which produces 8% of the world's carbon emissions.
With all of this being said, these seawalls are in need of an eco-friendly, sustainable, and durable alternative that protects the marine wildlife.
One area where we need to protect thriving wildlife is a smaller bay on Miami's southeast coast, Biscayne Bay. Biscayne Bay is a natural marine sanctuary where they have coral reefs, aquatic plants, mangrove forests, and wildlife such as shrimp, native fish, manatees, and so much more vibrancy. The area is highly affected to protect their wildlife, though due to the flooding from rising sea levels.
This is where our plan comes in. In terms of sea recovery and flood breaks, oysters are the king. Oysters live in salty coastal waters, usually clustering on older shells or any hard submerged surfaces. Oysters are filter feeders, which means they passively collect algae and phytoplankton from water for food. In this process, they filter and clean water. In fact, a single oyster can filter 50 gallons of water per day. They fuse together as they grow, forming sturdy rock-life reeds that perfect habitats for other marine animals and plants. Oysters are essentially living rocks that will stick together and stay in one place. Once oysters are connected, they are sturdy, resilient, and fast producing. This is exactly why they are a perfect mitigator to rising tides. Oysters act as a natural breakwater to waves that are incoming towards the coast. A breakwater is a barrier placed into the water to protect a coast or harbor from incoming waves. Breakwaters are usually large concrete structures, rock walls, and other man-made structures that are intended to protect coastlines from incoming waves. However, these breakwaters have a few key flaws. Firstly, they are not sustainable because they are mostly made of concrete, which is a huge CO2 emitter. Secondly, they are only a short-term solution because with sea levels continuing to rise, the walls will become ineffective over time because they aren't tall enough to reduce the wave's impact. Thus, they require constant maintenance for damage or height. Thirdly, they are inconvenient to marine life in the area because the building process impacts their habitats and can release harmful materials into the water. Modern-day breakwaters are outdated. This is exactly why we need an alternative solution. Enter the oyster reef. Oyster reefs are sustainable, eco-friendly, and non-invasive. Oysters filter massive amounts of water, thus helping the ocean to be more habitable for other animals, but also make it safer for recreational human activity. Additionally, they continue to grow over time, so they will be able to keep up with rising sea levels, and they can grow without constant maintenance. Once an oyster population is laid, they will continue to keep on building upon itself and expanding. Furthermore, they provide a home for an entire ecosystem of vegetation and animals. Oysters filter the water, making it easier for underwater plants to complete photosynthesis. This helps to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. The ecosystem doesn't just stop there. Vegetation brings back other marine life that feeds on them, such as sea snails, crustaceans, and small fish. These smaller consumers provide a food source for carnivorous food and squids. These species, especially close to major cities, have been displaced, but oyster reefs will bring them back. However, oysters cannot just be placed into the water and create reefs. They need a surface to latch onto in order to create the reefs. That is exactly where our proposed solution comes in. We call it an eco-column.
Next, we will go over the basic evolution of our eco-columns. It starts out by adding a 12-foot eco-concrete column every 5 feet in Biscayne Bay. Next, we add biodegradable bags filled with recycled oyster shells and attach it to the bottom of the column, which allows baby spat, basically oyster seeds, to attach to the old oyster shells. After about a year, the bio bag starts to break down into the water and the oysters start to pile up, while also including native plants to the column. Simultaneously, sand starts to build up again on the side that is facing the coast. Over time, the oyster eco-columns and sand build up even more, creating a more diverse ecosystem, with the plants attaching as well. Slowly but surely, native fish like bonefish, tarpon, and redfish, and shrimp and other marine animals get reintroduced to the area as the ecosystem enlarges. The end result should look similar to this, where they are rebuilt ecosystems near the column and native mangrove forests thriving in less chaotic water.
In order to execute our project, we're focusing on one specific mile of Biscayne Bay. We plan to place 1-foot columns approximately 5 feet apart along Biscayne Bay and attached recycled oyster shells. Each column would be constructed of recycled industrial waste, mostly granulated slag and pulverized ash, which has a 40% smaller carbon footprint than regular concrete. The cost of a column with oysters on it is about $23,000. This sounds expensive, but it's still significantly cheaper than concrete by itself, and it also lasts longer. We'd need approximately 1,520,640 cubic feet of concrete in order to create a 1-mile-long eco-column along Biscayne Bay. Based on the typical price of eco-concrete, the columns would cost a little over $20 million in total. If we were to use recycled shells from pre-existing programs, the cost for the shells would be roughly $10 million, including transportation. If we were to build columns along the entire length of the bay, the cost would come out to $1 billion, including transportation and employment, which is still 5 times less than the proposed Miami seawall along Biscayne Bay. In order to build these columns, we need to collaborate with the City of Miami to come up with a more sustainable solution to rising sea levels.
Despite all of this work, there's still more to be done. Miami annually outputs 36.5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide per year, so the city needs to improve to lower their carbon emissions. The government needs to work on many sustainable alternatives to their economic growth in order to become a greener city and protect their coasts. On a smaller but still effective level, everyone can make a difference in this global issue.
Firstly, if you eat oysters at home, at a lake house, or at a social gathering, make sure they're ending up in a shell cycling dump. You can do this by researching your local drop sites in your area for your shells. This will ensure the oysters you just ate can eventually end up in a restoration reef rather than a landfill. Secondly, respect the land and water at all beaches you go to. This is because we have to maintain the local ecosystems that are already offshore. Even if there is not an oyster reef or restoration project there, it is important to protect it to ensure the marine life there is safe. Examples of this are wearing safe sunscreen, practicing safe boating habits, and removing trash or plastic from the sand.
Lastly, it is also incredibly important and necessary that everyone does their part to lower carbon emissions by living a sustainable and green lifestyle. Despite it being at a large scale, like switching to eco-columns made of oysters or using environmentally friendly sunscreen, everyone can make a difference.